welcome everybody to the Industry We Want deep dive on our purchasing practices metric. I'm Olivia Wyndham-Stewart. I'm a senior advisor to the Industry We Want and also your presenter and moderator for today. We have 60 minutes scheduled for our session. We'll start very briefly with a quick reintroduction to the Industry We Want and the Industry We Want dashboard. I will then hand over to Leonie Abraham from the Better Buying Institute for some background on our purchasing practices metric, which was generated by the Better Buying Institute's Partnership Index Survey. We will then move on to reviewing the results of the Ethical Trading Initiative and Fairware, because we have specific MSI reports that were also generated within that survey. And I will then pass back, we'll have a couple more thoughts from Leonie, and then we will also hear more about how you can go forward with responsible purchasing practices in future. Please feel free to use the chat and Q&A function throughout the session, as I really very much hope we will have time to get to questions at the end. Of course, you're also very welcome to follow up by email or in person in any other way if you'd like to. So moving on, as a very quick reminder, the Industry We Want was initiated by the Ethical Trading Foundation, the Ethical Trading Initiative and Fairware to accelerate progress on social, commercial and environmental issues in the garment and footwear sector. And we're very pleased to have been joined in our endeavours by the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. And we have also benefited hugely from the partnership of many industry experts and widespread industry consultation and input, including, of course, for purchasing practices, the very well-renowned Better Buying Institute, who is joining us as our expert partner for purchasing practices. Now, on the next slide, I'm just going to share, really to remind those of you who have participated in our activities previously and to familiarise those of you who are new to the Industry We Want. Our shared vision is a garment and footwear sector that realises its full potential to ensure dignity for workers in decent jobs, thriving businesses along the supply chain, and a positive impact on the planet. And as indicated in our vision statement, the three pillars of our initiative are the social, the commercial, and the environmental. And within each of these pillars, we have determined our key focus areas. So this particular aspect was done in very wide consultation with affected stakeholders and industry experts. So in the social pillar, our focus area is wages, and specifically the gap between minimum wages and living wages in key garment producing countries. In the commercial pillar, which is the subject of our discussion today, our focus area is purchasing practices, specifically how to leverage supplier feedback to drive positive developments in commercial relationships in the industry, which are critical to the realization of both the social and the environmental goals. And in the environmental pillar, our focus area is greenhouse gas emissions and the reduction of these in line with net zero targets. So it's with these focus areas in mind that we launched our first pilot iteration of the Industry We Want dashboard, 3 annual metrics, 1 for wages, 1 for purchasing practices, and 1 for greenhouse gas emissions, that in 2022 have established our baseline measurements. Now, data for each of these metrics will be updated on an annual basis until at least 2025, so that we can gauge how the industry is progressing and ask bigger, stronger questions about how to support, stimulate and scale progress, and ultimately about how to transform the industry so it aligns with our vision. Now, today's session is focusing exclusively on the purchasing practices metric. And to provide you with some background on this, I'm now going to hand over to Leonie from the Better Buying Institute, who will give you some more information about how the Better Buying Institute operates and how we are partnering together. Leonie will then hand back to me and we will deep dive into the results. So over to you, Leonie.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Now, I know many of you on today's webinar will already be familiar with Better Buying, but for those of you who don't know about us, I just want to share some of the main points about our work. Our vision is for buyers and suppliers to work together with responsible purchasing practices to achieve shared goals of profitability and social and environmental sustainability. I'll explain how we do this on the next slide. So we're a global non-profit that flips the traditional due diligence process on its head by enabling suppliers to anonymously evaluate the purchasing practices of their customers. This feedback is then turned into data-driven insights so that brands and retailers can see what they're doing well, where they need to improve, and they can track changes over time. We provide subscribers with customized reports that analyze their own purchasing practices, can help them to understand the impact of their actions, and also guide future strategy policies and procedures. It's really important to emphasize that we put the supplier voice at the heart of everything that we do. Our surveys have been developed with suppliers. We provide a safe space for suppliers to raise concerns. And we also encourage them to contribute to solutions that strengthen relationships with their customers and enable them to provide good working conditions and wages. Moving on to the next slide, our core work is our annual data collection from suppliers about their customers' purchasing practices. We offer 2 surveys a year. They're different, but they're also complementary. The Better Buying Purchasing Practices Index is our flagship survey, if you like. It takes place in April and it takes a deep dive into Tier 1 purchasing practices. It's a useful diagnostic tool for providing detailed guidance on what you're doing well and how you can improve. The second survey is the Better Buying Partnership Index. This takes place in October and it's a shorter survey that looks at suppliers' perceptions of the business relationship. The Partnership Index is the one the industry we want selected to provide its top-line indicator of industry progress on purchasing practices. And I'll run through it in a bit more detail on the next slide. Now, the Partnership Index was created specifically at the request of suppliers who were intimidated perhaps by filling out the more detailed survey, or they just didn't have enough time to do it. So what we created was a subjective survey that's quick and easy for them to complete. It can collect feedback at scale, and it provides a snapshot of actionable data. So it's what you can do now to improve. It also has a much wider reach, and it can be used across multiple industries and across upstream tiers of the supply chain. We piloted it in 2020, and we launched the first annual Partnership Index rating cycle in October last year. Now, the next slide shows the areas that the Partnership Index covers and also how the questions are asked. So everything links back to Better Buying's 5 principles of responsible purchasing. These are the 5 fundamental behaviours that underpin all responsible purchasing, and they're visibility, stability, time, fair financials, and shared responsibility. The survey is also available in multiple languages, and we're adding more languages all the time based on subscriber demand. Before Olivia takes a closer look at the industry we want, ETI and Fairware metrics, I'm just going to share some industry-wide insights based on the results of October's partnership survey. And these are on the next slide. These results are from across both soft goods and hard goods, and they show that not only how much pressure suppliers are under, but also that buyers are at risk of potential supply disruption, higher costs, and increased reputational risks. Key takeaways are that many buyers are failing to provide suppliers with enough time, with enough visibility, or fair financial practices, and they don't seek suppliers' ideas for product and process innovation, which obviously leads to a buildup of unnecessary costs and inefficiencies across the supply chain. And with that, I'll hand back to Olivia.
Thank you, Leonie. Right, so as Leonie has described, our purchasing practices metric has been generated by the Better Buying Institute's Partnership Index Survey, which is the annual survey available for all suppliers to rate their buyers' purchasing practices on a scale of 1 to 5. Now, scores of 5, if the supplier gives the buyer a score of 5, it indicates that the buyer is behaving as a true partner. So you can see the true partner category here in turquoise. This means that the buyer is satisfying the particular measure, so the issue that you will see all of the time. Scores of 4 indicate that the buyer is behaving as a collaborator. This means that the buyer is satisfying the particular measure only often rather than always. And as mentioned actually in the BBPI report, the difference between all of the time and often is actually quite significant and impactful for suppliers and their workers and the environment. So the difference between those two scores should be taken seriously. Now, scores of 1 to 3 indicate that the buyer is behaving as a detractor, which is obviously the primary category that we would like to avoid. So you can see the detractor category here is 17%. So the survey, which was circulated in October, received over 500 responses from suppliers in the apparel sector across 50 different countries. And you will see that the score runs on a potential range of minus 100 to plus 100. So for the apparel sector, the overall score that we have received is plus 39. And if we break down the feedback overall, we can see that amongst all the buyers rated, 56% of overall behaviours were considered those of a true partner, 28% of the behaviours were those of a collaborator, and 17% of the behaviours were those of a detractor. Now, it's worth remembering, as I'll show you in the next slide, that about 75% of respondents indicated that they were rating a preferred partner. So the results very much reflect the behaviours of the industry's best actors. Now, if we move on to the full partnership index report with the breakdown on each of the categories rated, we can see how suppliers are experiencing the different issues. We'll do this first for the whole industry score. We'll then do the same for the ETI score, and we'll then do the same for the Fairware score. So you can see a little bit of the range that we're looking at here. So of the 12 categories for the industry, these are the top 6. So these are the 6 which have the highest percentage of true partner scores. So you can see at the top, first of all, we have business dealings are free from corruption and bribery, with 90.8% of buyers acting as true partners, so satisfying this issue all of the time. And this is the highest percentage of true partners of any of the 12 categories. Now, after this, we have, which I just mentioned, a clear indication that suppliers are generally rating preferred partners. Now, this can indicate one of two things. It can indicate that perhaps buyers are more comfortable rating preferred partners, but it may also be that preferred partners are those who are more willing to reach out, to circulate the survey, to gather feedback from their suppliers. So if we can expand that base, we might learn different things. But nevertheless, it is interesting to bear in mind that much of this feedback does reflect the practices of the best actors in the industry to a certain extent. So beyond absence of corruption and bribery in preferred partnerships, the 4 most highly rated behaviours are communication, so the buyer is demonstrating good communication practices, fair financial practices, which is of course very fundamental to what we're looking at, also the provision of visibility necessary to business operations, and then buyers doing their part to improve environmental performance and practices of its products in the supply chain. Now, you can see that the true partner scores begin to actually descend quite rapidly to the 50% line, even amongst these top 4 categories in the half dozen that are the best scores for the industry. And the detractor score actually begins to rise to almost 20% on the matter of environmental performance. If on the next slide, we then look at the bottom 6, we can see that for each of these categories, fewer than 50 suppliers are rating their buyers as true partners. Now, this is even amongst some of the industry's best actors. So the issues set out here are clearly ones of quite of significance. They include stable businesses, buyers giving enough timing for suppliers to conduct the order, support towards improved working conditions, the reduction of duplicative audit requirements, efficient operational processes, and suggestions or communication around product and process innovation. So we can also see across each of these categories, as the true partner score goes down, the percentage of detractors, so the percentage of buyers behaving in an unhelpful way in each of these areas, is beginning to creep up. So actually in 4 of these categories, support for working conditions, the reduction of duplicative audit requirements, efficient operational processes, and suggestions on product and process innovations, the percentage of detractors is now over the 20% mark, rising to 25.2% in the most severe case, which is relevant, which is operational processes are efficient. So the 2022 findings, which is what we're looking at here for the whole industry, make it clear how much pressure a lot of suppliers, even those engaging with some of the best actors, are under, with many buyers never, rarely, or only sometimes providing enough time, providing adequate visibility, providing stable business, allowing for fair financials. And many buyers are actually missing opportunities to improve their businesses by not seeking suppliers' input for product and process innovation, which can lead to unnecessary costs and inefficiencies. So as Leonie indicated, this gives us a very interesting sort of high-level temperature check on how buyers are generally experiencing some of the most key industry practices. Now, if we go to the next slide, what we can see is the score relevant to all ETI member brands. So any supplier who participated in this survey rating an ETI member brand. And this was also generated within the Better Buying Institute's larger partnership index survey. So if we look at the ETI score now, we can see that all ETI member brands who were rated score 8 points above the wider industry score. So that's at 47, as compared with the industry score that we looked at before, which is in the lighter gray line just there. And again, that's on the scale of -100 to +100. And of the overall scores for ETI member brands, 63% of practices were rated those of a true partner, 20% were those of a collaborator, and 17% were those of a detractor. Now, if we move to the larger report, which has been published on our website, all of this is available on our website if you'd like to sort of follow along or look in more detail. This provides detailed scores for ETI brands on each of the key 12 categories that suppliers are able to rate their buyers on. So this slide shows the 6 categories in which ETI member brands receive the highest percentage of ratings as a true partner. So at the top bar, the statement presented to suppliers, which reads, which we have translated to read, ETI member brands business dealings with us are free from corruption and bribery. The turquoise bar shows that over 92% of ETI brands received a 5 or a true partner rating on this issue. Now the dark gray bar sitting just above that shows the true partner percentage for the industry-wide score. So although the ETI score here is a little higher than the industry score, for both ETI and the industry as a whole, this was the most highly rated category. Interestingly though, and something that member brands who participated might want to follow up on, it is clear that elements, although potentially very small, of corruption and bribery are still present, not only in the industry, but also amongst ETI member brands. Now, just under this one, we can see the second highest score, which shows that the majority of respondents, so 76.5%, are rating their customers as preferred partners. This is again consistent with a good rating at industry level, which is shown in dark gray just above the turquoise bar. If we move on to the next one, we can see that 70% of buyers were considered true partners when it comes to communication. Clear and timely communication is, of course, vital to the efficient delivery of products and can have vital implications to working conditions. So it's very promising and positive to see that the ETI score in the turquoise is actually quite notably higher than the industry average. Again, on the 4th point, we see the critical issue of fair financial practices. And we know very clearly the link between price squeezes and poor social and environmental outcomes. So again, it's very good in this sense to see that over 70% of ETI member brands are dealing fairly in the financials. And there's also a significant improvement here when compared to the industry score in dark gray, which sits at 56.8%, which is 12% lower than the 12% lower than the ETI score. So ETI scores 12 percentage points higher on that particular issue. Now, the two final issues show that in the majority, ETI member brands are also providing stable business, critical to effective planning, and providing enough time for all orders. And again, in both of these categories, a higher percentage of ETI member brands are receiving true partner ratings than the industry actors as a whole. But I do want to note that despite the many positive aspects of these top scores, and we'll look at the bottom 6 in just a moment, it is also very important to note that not only do we see a higher percentage of true partners amongst ETI member brands, we also, in many of these categories, see a higher percentage of detractors amongst ETI member brands than in the industry average. For preferred partners, you will see ETI score, which is in the dark blue here for detractor, is actually 11.8% compared with 8.1 in the wider survey. On communication practices, again in the dark blue, it's 14.1% when compared with 11.9 for the industry. For fair financial practices, it's 14.1 compared with the industry score of 13. And on the matter of timing for orders is 18.8 are considered detractors compared with the industry average of 17.1. So while there may only be a few percentage points between them, it is nevertheless quite interesting to note that ETI member brands exhibit both above average scores on the true partner scale, but also on the detractor scale. So we see some kind of extremes here. Now we'll look quickly at the next 6 practices. So these are the lower end of the true partner ratings for ETI member brands. We can again see on all of these issues, less than 60% of ETI member brands are considered true partners. So the scores are going down quite a little bit. Saying that, however, we can also again see that the true partner scores in turquoise are higher for ETI member brands than they are for the industry as a whole, which is shown in dark grey. As an example, you can see that 56.5% of ETI member brands are rated as true partners on the matter of operational efficiency, compared with just 43.7% in the bigger industry score. Likewise, on support for improved working conditions, we can see a jump, and for improved environmental performance, we can again see a jump. In fact, across all 6 categories in this lower end, there is an average 8% difference, so an uptick, an 8% positive improvement between ETI member brands' true partner performance when compared with these same 6 scores in the industry. But again, we can also see that there are a few areas in which the percentage of ETI member brands behaving as detractors, so the category shown in darker blue, is higher than those in the industry score shown in white for the category of detractor. And in particular, you can see on this issue of visibility, where 20% of ETI member brands are rated as detractors compared with 16.8% in the wider score. And I want to remind you, this is only ETI member brands rated. It's not ETI member brands as a whole. You can also see this in the score relating to support for improved environmental performance, where there is again a shift, and also in product and process innovation. So what we have here again in the lower 6 is examples of ETI member brand practices being better, and also in some cases worse. Now this next slide shows very quickly, and I won't go into it in a huge amount of detail, some of the additional information you can find in the report, which indicates the type of supplier responding, both in terms of the business type and the supplier gross revenue, as well as the location of the supplier responding. So for ETI, you can see specifically there's quite a high presence from the United Kingdom. Most orders are coming directly from ETI buyers, and actually most of the suppliers responding, just almost 50%, are in the lower gross revenue categories of under 5 million and 5 to 24 million. Now, and please do go into the website if you're keen to look into that in great detail. Now let's go to the next slide, which is the Fairware score. So it's interesting that we have the industry score, we have the ETI score, we have the Fairware score. Now, the Fairware report shows an overall score of 67. So that's 28 points above the industry score of 39, which is again shown here in the lighter grey. The slide also shows that 73% of Fairware member brands are behaving as a true partner, which is a notably higher percentage than the industry score that we've seen before, and only 6% are behaving as detractors, which is a notably lower percentage. Now, these top level scores reflect very well on Fair Wear member brands, but also, of course, there's always room for improvement, even if not very much. So we'll look here. These are the 6 categories in which Fair Wear has received the highest true partner ratings. So again, we start with the top score. Fair Wear member brand business dealings with us are free from corruption and bribery. You have 94.4%. But again, interestingly, still this presence in the detractor category of some behaviors that member brands might like to investigate. On communication, we have a score of 86.1 compared with 60.7 in the industry score. So if you look at the turquoise against the dark gray, you'll see really significant increases in the true partner behavior for against the industry score. You see the same on stability, on financials, and on visibility. The difference is again quite significant. And in fact, if you look across these 6 scores overall, Fair Wear is scoring approximately 18 percentage points higher in the true partner category, which is a significant uptick on normal industry practice. What is also notable is that Fair Wear is scoring lower in the detractor category in 5 out of 6 of these issues. So in fact, on average, even with the slight increase we see in the corruption and bribery issue, the detractor category scores an average 8% lower, with very significant differences, especially in the areas of stability, fair financial practices, and visibility. So it's a very kind of impressive result that we see here from Fair Wear. Now, these trends remain basically entirely consistent in the lower 6 categories. So if you look at the turquoise bars indicating the percentage of Fair Wear member brands rated as true partners for each of these behaviors, you see that each of them is again significantly higher than the dark gray bars indicating the industry score. And again, across these bottom 6, Fair Wear is scoring an average 18 percentage points higher than the industry score. Similarly, again, if you look at the detractor category, you will see Fair Wear member brands behaving, scoring consistently lower in this category again than the industry score. And in fact, across all 6 of these categories, there is an average 14% difference in the detractor rating between Fair Wear and the industry as a whole. So what you're seeing with Fair Wear is not only a huge increase in the behavior as true partners, but also very, very minimal presence of detractor type behavior. So basically, to summarize, it is clear from this report that not only are Fair Wear practices, the best practices better than the average for industry actors, but suppliers who are working with Fair Wear member brands are far less likely to experience detractor behavior from their clients. Now, finally, just to round off, on the next slide, please. So this is again the data that we receive in the report from Better Buying, and it will provide you with some information on the type of supplier, the business type responding to the survey, and also the location. So one of the primary differences here we'll see both for ETI and in the industry report and for Fair Wear, it's mainly these finished goods suppliers and sort of end of the line suppliers responding to this. One of the differences here, of course, for Fair Wear brands in terms of geography, there are Asian suppliers, there are no UK suppliers present as there are with ETI, and there is a higher percentage of suppliers with gross revenue in the lowest 2 categories. So that's going up to about 63% just there, and extremely few in the lower categories. So that is the rundown. If we go to the next slide, you'll see the 3 scores, the industry score, the Fair Wear score, and the ETI score next to each other. That's what sits underneath those scores. The reports, as I've said, are available on the website, and we'd be very happy to talk about them in more detail. I'm now going to pass back over to Leonie, who will share some ideas about how different stakeholders might want to follow up or get involved in this in some various ways. So over to you, Leonie.
Thank you. Thanks, Olivia. That's really interesting, isn't it, to see all the results that are coming in. And I think it's fair to say that the industry we want has got off to a great start. And I also think there's now a lot more excitement and energy now that we can see how the process works, and we're actually starting to generate some metrics. So the Better Buying surveys carried out last October mean we now have top line data on industry purchasing practices. We effectively have a starting point from which we can focus on driving change and improvements. And we must continue to build this momentum over the next couple of years. For ETI and Fairware, your reports can track the impact of your work. And from the scores so far, as Olivia has already spoken about in depth, we're already seeing that your members are outperforming the industry benchmark, and future reports will be key to showing how this changes over time. But we also need to collect a lot more information about your members' purchasing practices. The scores that we've produced are based on the aggregate performance of companies who invited their suppliers to take part in the survey. So what we really need to do is build an even bigger, a better, and a stronger data set. And to do this, we need even more companies to encourage their suppliers to take part in the next rating cycle. So the message today to the MSIs is to get your members involved and get them to invite their suppliers to take part in the survey in October. The more supplier participation we have will also mean that more brands will get enough ratings for us to produce an individual company report for them. And we'd also love to see more brands agree to be transparent with their scores and go public with their company reports, so that we can have a much broader discussion on the issues, where we are and how to move forward on purchasing practices. So again, please encourage your members to take company reports and also get them to share their reports with you, so that you can shape the support that you provide for them. The next slide shows the next steps for brands and retailers. For the brands and retailers on today's call, if you really want to figure out the relationship with your suppliers and where to focus your purchasing practices efforts, you need to have individual company reports. So we'd encourage as many of you as possible to get involved in the October rating cycle. And the best way to do this is to join Better Buying as a subscriber. This way, our team will be on hand to provide support to your suppliers throughout the rating cycle. We'll be able to liaise with them to get as many ratings in as possible. And we can also offer lots of different ways for you to see the ratings. For example, you can compare feedback on different brands. You can look at the differences across different geographic regions or different parts of your business. And provided you get at least 5 supplier ratings, we can produce a customized company report for you, so you can see your supplier feedback on your own unique purchasing practices. And you'll also be able to see how you benchmark against your peers and how you compare with the industry we want and the MSI scores. The Partnership Index is also a great starting point for a more detailed investigation further down the line. So you could then join next year's Purchasing Practices Index for more of a deep dive into what's going on. If you don't want to subscribe with us, then please stay engaged with the industry we want by asking your suppliers to join the rating cycle anyway. And if you get more than 5 ratings, we can still produce a company report for you once the rating cycle has finished, but you won't get our support and outreach during the rating cycle itself. And again, we need buyers to take the lead on disclosure and transparency. And we hope that more companies will not only engage with us, but they'll go public with their reports and scores, so that we can really begin to move the transparency agenda forward. And finally, get in touch with me to find out how to subscribe to our surveys, or if you've got any questions. And my details are on screen there, and obviously the team at the industry we want will share them as well. I'm now going to hand over to Eliza from the MSI MSI Group for Responsible Purchasing Practices.
Thank you, Leonie. My name is Elisa Shepherd. I am Senior Advisor for Business Practices at ETI. Great to see so many people here today focused on responsible purchasing practices. I believe I've got the right audience, so this is a quick introduction from me on behalf of the MSI Group of Fairware, the joint ETIs, and the German Textile Bundes about our upcoming initiative. So we are preparing to launch the Learning and Implementation Community. This is focused on finding practical, workable solutions to improving purchasing practices. We will be inviting companies of different shapes and sizes within the apparel and footwear sectors to join the community. This community is going to have a dynamic learning environment with a series of workshops, expert input, and supported dialogue with suppliers. Many of you will have seen and fed back on the draft Common Framework for Responsible Purchasing Practices. Thank you so much for your input. What this framework does is it brings together and aligns well-recognized principles of good purchasing practices and suggests positive practices within these principles. What the Learning and Implementation Community brings is recognition that these are not off-the-shelf solutions. The community is about finding out how do we really make these principles work in practice. It's about finding solutions that work for your business models and, importantly, work for the business models of your suppliers. So with that in mind, we'll be bringing together a community of committed companies to share learning, case studies, explore solutions, and in between these workshops, we will have additional support from your individual MSIs to help you determine your areas of focus and to help you make progress within those areas of focus. We're looking to launch the community in September, and it will run for approximately 2 years. If you'd like to find out more, if you have any questions, please use the email address that's in this slide. Otherwise, you can get in touch directly with your MSIs, and we can really dive into more detail around what the Learning and Implementation Community will look like. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to hand back to Olivia.
Thanks, Elisa. Okay, so I mean, that's it mainly for the presentation. I just want to let you all know that we have some events coming up. This event, of course, has been focused on our purchasing practices metric, but as well as that, we also have our GHG metric, and we will be having a deep dive into that on May the 12th. So please put that in your calendar and be sure to register when you receive the information. I'm very sorry, that's my phone. It's been now switched off. And also on June the 21st, we will be having a deep dive on the wages metric. So please do join us for that, because we have some really interesting data coming through on the wages. And actually, if you go to our website, you will see that we have added more countries to our wages database. And it's very interesting because it's actually the gap between the living wage and the minimum wage has stayed stable, even though we have added those new countries. So it's still at 45%. Now in September, we'll also be having an Industry We Want conference. So details to be announced soon. Please do join us for that as well. Finally, before we turn to questions, because I think we will have some time for questions, or we can finish early and go have some tea. But finally, do visit the website, theindustrywewant.com, and contact us if you would like to talk more about any of this at info@theindustrywewant.com. Of course, you can also follow us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on, I think that's it, Twitter and LinkedIn. Yeah, okay, no TikTok.